everyone, and welcome to Against the Wake podcast. Again, it's me, Martin Roberts, and Jake, and we're going to just be talking about the... Oh, sorry, mate.
Sorry, fine. You just introduced me as well.
Well, Jake, you know what I mean. And we're just going to be talking about the latest events, announcements, largely a bit of a focus on politics, and we'll have a little local focus, shall we say, on some local things that have happened, incidents, maybe, events, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, this week been quite a good week. Over the weekend, I went to Leeds Pride, which was its 20th anniversary. Fantastic event. Before we started the podcast, we were just saying that there are some people that don't like how loud Pride is and stuff like that, and prefer more quieter things. So, a few different perspectives on there that we may cover one day. And the previous week, we had, because I'm a parish councillor in Ackworth Parish Council, we authorised the knocking down of the Low Ackworth Community Centre, and that is to make way for the new community centre. So that's all taken place. And just a little intro about the Low Ackworth Community Association, who started like 40 years ago. They got the community centre there in the first place. It's a little bit like a porter cabin. It then, over the years, it's sort of like falling into disrepair and stuff, so that's why it needs a new building. And there's a bit of controversy about it. Some people are for this organisation and against it, but I think it's important to support it. So, yeah, we've made inroads on that project. So, yeah, really, really happy about that. So, yeah, that's me done. What about you?
Oh, well, I think it is important to support community projects because we have a vanishingly small amount of community spaces left.
I think, this is where you get into the wonderful world of parish councils, and all the stuff that they do sometimes gets overlooked, and sometimes they're a nightmare, but I think quite often they're done well. And as we all know, there was that set of videos that went viral about Handforth Parish Council, and I think that's just a snippet of what can happen sometimes at meetings and stuff. But
I'd probably say they're more of a mixed bag than more often than not. I think there are some very good, outstanding parish councils, and then there are also some basket cases as well.
Yeah, that's very true. I do think on all of the parish councils, you'll find that tensions rise up on like really bizarre things. So, like, you can have a fierce debate about hanging baskets, and who'd have thought? Yeah. You know what I mean? To most people, it's not a thing, but you're spending public money, so it needs to be done right and stuff like that.
And it tends to get very personal as well.
Yeah.
Like, battles seem to happen over egos and personalities, and especially when you get into really sort of small areas, it can be about family disputes and stuff like feature into it and all sorts, and it does get a bit mad, really. Well, what we're going to be discussing today, I think you need to.
So obviously we've got Andy Burnham that's coming as PM. So we've got his new cabinet. We'll have a bit of a chat about that. He's made quite a lot of announcements, which, we'll have a discussion about that. So there's like lots of cost of living announcements, and then there's some I'd say wider announcements, like rough sleeping and stuff like that. So we'll have a discussion about that. And then we'll finish it all off with what's been happening locally in the Wakefield district. It's not necessarily always going to be about the Wakefield district. It might be like something else nearby, or some local politics sort of issues or local events that might not be on the national scale, shall we say?
A local lens as what's going on.
A local lens
at a local level. It's not all just about national politics and the big stories.
So yeah, do you want to start with Andy Burnham and then move on to his cabinet?
So
what do you think?
Andy Burnham, yeah. Andy Burnham's Prime Minister. Starmer's gone. Oh, that's brilliant news. I'm really happy about that. Worst PM in history. He's gone.
The worst in history? Even worse than Liz Truss?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's... Okay.
Let's have a look at his record. Became Labour leader by lying, and then the policy platform he was elected Labour leader on, he just shedded straight after. He made announcements in the run up to the election. One, obviously not a penny more on your council tax. And then councils had to hike up council tax after the 2024 election, so multiple times. So they're just little examples. And then since he's been, since before he was in office, he's been a big supporter of Israel's genocide on the Palestinian people. They've basically, the whole debacle around the winter fuel payments, there's been a whole host of issues where they've backtracked on, and he's just a thoroughly deceitful and deceptive man. So I'm glad to see the back of him. And then we're overlooking the whole scandal culture of gifts, freebies, free gear Kia, around the Taylor Swift concerts, which I always found a really weird one of why grown men were wanting to go watch Taylor Swift. Then
she's a good musician, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I just
you're making it all seedy.
I just think it just gives me a real seedy vibe. The amount of these older guys wanting to go see Taylor Swift. That's just me. I don't know. And then obviously on top of that, the tickets to Arsenal concerts, the glasses and clothes he was given, and then that ludicrous story of the flat in centre of London is where his son or daughter had to stay in to study because they needed a quiet place to study and things like that. I think it's just ridiculous. So I'm glad to see the back of the man.
Yeah.
He's gone.
I mean, I get you. I mean, I'm still not sure whether it's worst in history. I mean, don't get me wrong. I agree with a lot of your sentiment there. But, I mean, Liz Truss united, I would say, the whole of the UK in the fact that she managed to basically, if it wasn't for the intervention of backbenchers and media, the state, every single mechanism this country has and all the people in it, basically everyone united because she was about to trash the economy in 45 days or something. You know what I mean? That's pretty good going on the disaster front. So I don't think he's worse than Truss.
I do. Does she count as one of the worst prime ministers? Well, does she even count as a prime minister? Because she didn't even last that long. I mean, can you really add her to the list of prime ministers?
She's on there. She's broken the record. I think it's officially noted down.
But you can't do any short.
What I do find funny about this, but it's funny how we've gone on this angle. But what I do find funny is she's still there in the background, and the latest thing is she's planning her comeback.
Yeah, well, grifters have got a grift.
That's a comeback none of us want. Just stay where you are.
But it might be going a bit too far to say the worst prime minister in history. But I mean, he's done
a lot of things that you disagree with.
He's definitely one of the worst prime ministers I've ever known.
You're not happy with the guy. I think that's clear.
And I'm glad he's gone. I'm really glad to see the back of him.
So, are you glad to see Andy Burnham?
I mean,
Jake, you are allowed to be happy about something.
No, there's a weird tension because I'm skeptical of the guy because of his past. He came up under Blair and Brown. He's got that Blairite sort of background. He does flip-flop a lot on issues. He was a big proponent of the Iraq War back in that time. It did a lot in terms of privatisation and the PFI schemes, which have led to a lot of the issues, the financial troubles we have today. So I'm sceptical about him as a political operator. I am mildly optimistic with the stuff he's been saying, and I do hope that his time as Manchester Mayor has maybe shaped him a little bit differently and
grounded him.
Yeah, grounded him a little bit more, and I think some of the policies he's announcing is a positive sign. But while I want to be optimistic, while I want to hope that there's going to be some positive change for people, I am skeptical of the sort of how far down that road is going to go with change. That's probably where I am. It's a bit of a mix sort of. Mixed thoughts and feelings.
I mean, I was disappointed with Keir Starmer. You know what I mean? I was hoping for a lot more, and I do think it was a disappointment. So, yes, I am glad to see him go as well. I think I'm glad to see Andy Burnham come in. I think that his time as Manchester Mayor has shifted his politics. I think it has given him a different slant on things. And I think, because one of my criticisms of Westminster is, I do think, because all MPs now are within the top 5% of the highest paid people in the UK. You know, so I do think that's made them a bit lofty. They're not in touch, no matter how hard they try, they're not in touch with what's going on in, you know, with people day to day. They do not know what it's like to be earning and working on minimum wage, you know, 25k a year sort of thing, and trying to pay all your bills in this cost of living crisis. Like, they just don't get it. Like, they don't live and breathe it. They can't feel that. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll never know what it's like to be straight. You know what I mean? I'm not. So you can empathise with it as much as you want, but they just don't get it. And it's not to say that none of them have struggled in the past, but they're not struggling now. I think that, because I've listened to LBC quite a lot, and in one of the interviews that they had an interview with David Blunkett. And again, I realise some people will and won't like this guy as well. But one thing he did say was, it was like, when it comes to the cost of living crisis, he has to keep pinching himself because he's not in that position now where, you know, he can ride it out, as it were. So he has to keep pinching himself to, like, remember what it was like when he was poor, when he didn't have much money coming in, what it was like when he was growing up and there wasn't enough food necessarily to go around, so they were sharing, they were hand-me-downs, you know, they relied on the state to help him get by. So he's sort of like, tries to remember that time, to remember what people are going through now, if that makes sense. So that's what he was sort of said. I think a lot of MPs are in that position. I think some of them have forgot. So yeah, I'm quite glad to see him. I think his early announcements are encouraging, and I think that I think the snippets out there, so as to where he wants to lead it.
Yeah, I think the story is you're optimistic. This is going to be the theme throughout everything. You're more optimistic and see the positive, and I'm more naturally pessimistic.
I think it will be surprising when I'm skeptical.
Realistic. You are skeptical, realistic.
Sometimes you can be skeptical of everything, though, and you miss people that are genuinely there to do some good. Not you personally, I just mean in general. Some skepticism can just be negative, and that's the danger. So I try and look for the good because, you know, the world's a bit of a disaster. You turn on the news and, you know, you need to go grab a drink afterwards, you know, just to cheer up. Because, I mean, pick your vice, you know what I mean, to cheer yourself up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, true. So anyway, he's appointed all his top cabinet members?
So the cabinet, yeah.
What do you think? What's going on with that?
So an unusual choice was, I've forgotten it, John Reid?
John Healey?
John Reid.
Jesus.
I knew I meant. Yeah, well, I did call John Healey. I'm going to call him John Reid again. No, I did call John Healey, and people were like, nah, that's not going to happen. And so when it were announced, I was like, I called that. So I see that as a win for me, personally. But an unusual choice, I think, because Ed Miliband and other names were up there, weren't there, before him? So that'll be interesting. And yeah, I'm not really overly surprised at the people that have been demoted, the people that have kept the positions. I'm not overly surprised. I'm not surprised at who's in, you know, the new people that are in. We've got Big Ange back.
Yeah, we've got Angela.
The media slates Big Ange, but I quite like, you know, a feisty northerner who says it how it is. I know people don't like that, but, you know, cheers me up.
I'm not keen on her. I think she's a really bad representative of working class people.
Well, you know, fair. I don't.
No, I look, she were happy to go along with a lot of the awful stuff the government have done. She's not really, I don't think she's really interested in fighting for working class people and stuff. She's one of those, you said earlier, have got in as a politician, have kind of forgot the roots and stuff. I just, I mean, to be honest, most of the current parliamentary Labour Party were picked to be Starmer loyalists. So there's not really any talent in any of them. And I just think getting a good, decent cabinet out of that PLP is tough, really. I don't really rate many of them. And I think
is there anyone?
I think the fact that Burnham had to basically stand in a by-election to get elected to Parliament to then become leader shows how little talent there is in the Parliamentary Labour Party. There wasn't one person who could really get enough support to become Prime Minister.
I think that links in. I think all that links in with a wide, like another subject matter entirely, which is why is there so little faith in a lot of politicians? Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I'll be nice here and sort of like say, I think a lot of people go into politics, and I think even councillors, and I think that you go in for the right reasons, but then you get caught up in the system, and the system almost like pushes you down this path. And we, as we know, went against the whip and both became independent councillors through different paths, and I think it was like, no, I'm not going to go for that. But then we just became independent councillors.
You see,
you know what I mean?
You see, the one thing I challenge is I don't think everybody goes into politics to do good.
Okay, yeah.
Right, I think a lot of, particularly at a local level, I think a lot of people go in to get that prefix before the name, that little CLLR. They're just there to be there.
Do you not think before they're elected, though?
There's very few who go in with ideas of what they'd want to change. They just seem to go in and then they're happy to be there. And that's been our experience locally. We both talked about
I definitely think, but I think when you're before you're elected for the first time as a councillor, I think you are going into it for the right reasons. And I think that what you find is you get in, and then it's almost like after your first term, it's almost like you've had near enough all your hopes and dreams scuppered. That's how I felt. This is how I felt anyway. I was only in it for 2 years, and I think, thank God. And I think that the entire system is just aimed to stop you from being a good councillor, that you end up going, all right, I can't do everything that's on the leaflet, so yeah, I'm happy to be you. I think it almost pushes you into that position.
I think we went in with ideas of what we'd like to see happen, what we'd like to change. Some of my big things were around public transport, around housing, and things like that. They were like my two big things: outsourcing, ending outsourcing, that sort of thing, or at least limiting outsourcing. Knowing at a council level, we're not going to be able to. I wasn't going to be able to achieve sort of everything I wanted, but that's the sort of stuff I wanted to push. Now, you went in, you wanted to do things, and out of a Labour group of 56 at one point, there weren't really many of us wanting with that
just
sort
of
mindset. This is what I'm talking about. I mean, I think I'll just finish quickly, and then I think there's a difference between there's the political motives of people going into politics, which I think I probably more fit into wanting to achieve certain things. I would say then there's a community angle. So then there were councillors who aren't very political, but are really active in the communities and stuff, who, I kind of had quite a bit of respect for, but there wasn't that sense of wanting to do anything, wanting to change anything, wanting to help tackle poverty or, the ridiculous housing situation we have in the district and, things like that. That's what I'm trying. I just got the feeling that a lot of people just wanted to go in just to be there and not really do anything in a sense. So for me, I didn't get the impression that people wanted to go into local politics to actually, improve their areas or, to do good in that sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think a lot of people go into politics. So this is locally and nationally and internationally as well. And it's almost like they have no ideology. As we know, we've got a mutual friend who he just wants to be a councillor. You know what I mean? He's got no ideology. There's no beliefs there. One of the reasons I wanted to be a district councillor is, one, represent my ward, because I felt that the ward I represented, which was Ackworth, North Emsall and Upton, Ward 1, in the Wakefield district, I felt that it was on the peripheries of the Wakefield district. It was left out of good decisions. Like, the only sort of decisions that got made were some roadworks, and just getting a road tarmac. That's the only thing you got, which I would class as basics. You know what I mean? So it wasn't getting anything that helped it. And there were sort of things, because I was elected to the parish council in 2019, there were sort of things in my time as a parish councillor that I was like, why isn't Wakefield Council helping us? Why isn't it helping this parish council that wants to? So, for instance, there's things like lease agreements. We've been trying to get a lease agreement with Wakefield Council. Wakefield Council be the hold up to it for like 7 years. You know what I mean? We're talking a lease. This should be bread and butter of the council, But this would do a massive amount for the local parish of Ackworth, And I realise I'm banging on about Ackworth because there's all sorts of things in Upton as well. And it was like, there's really small decisions that would make a big impact for those areas. And that's why I wanted to go into it. So mine's a bit more community focused, but it was also on wider issues such as, I wanted to try and get, or certainly put forward a campaign for, getting things back in, run by the council, such as, whether it be hedge trimming or roadworks or housing or, all those sort of things, to get more things like that. So that's why I went into it. We've sort of gone down why we were councillors, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. But I think it's linked in. So back to the cabinet then. So back to Burnham's cabinet. So I think one thing I noticed, there's a lot more MPs representing northern constituencies in there, which obviously fits into his wider goals of decentralising power out of London and sort of including other areas of the UK in terms of investment and stuff. Although having said that, not all those MPs are necessarily northern. They might represent northern constituencies, but as the Labour Party has such a love of parachuting people in, you have these weird sort of mismatches where you'll have like a London MP representing a South Yorkshire constituency. Like Ed Miliband is a good example of that. He was born and raised in London and represents Doncaster Central, which you have a lot of that, don't you?
Let's just put it out there, John Healy, or John Reid as I wanted to call him, is a Wakey lad.
So you say, yeah.
He was born in Wakefield.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
I did chat GBT.
I mean, I don't know if we want to claim that, though. I don't know if we really want to promote that.
Well, you know what I mean. It's a start, innit? We'll see how he does. At the end of the day, where someone's born in the UK, like if they're born in Kent and they do a really good job as Chancellor or Prime Minister or whatever, I don't really care. As long as a minister or prime minister, whichever role you've got as a politician, as long as you're doing your best for the whole of the United Kingdom and your local constituency, I'm all on board with that. Because I do think, again, this is just from what's been said on LBC, because I listen to it quite a bit at the moment. Some people in the Southwest are saying, yeah, we need to make sure we're represented and heard in decision making, because we're left out from London as well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I get that there's issues in the north, and that's clear, and perhaps the north's worse off than us, but we're not exactly thriving down here. We've got problems, we've got issues as well. We need transport links and all the rest of it. So as long as they're representing the whole of the UK, I think, as long as we're going forward together, don't leave anyone behind. That's what I think people forget sometimes. And less London. And that doesn't mean I want London to do bad. I just think, let's spread some of the good stuff London's got to everyone so we can all do well.
Yeah,
I think that there's good inclinations there. That's what he wants to do.
We'll see. I mean,
so what about the announcements?
I mean, as we were saying, there's not really a lot of talent in the PLP. I'm just a bit ambivalent on them all. I think I like seeing Louise Hay having quite a central role in this new government. I do. She's on the soft left of the party, but I do quite like her in terms of knowledge, in terms of when she was Transport Secretary and stuff. I think she did a really good job. She laid a lot of groundwork down in that role for sort of GB Rail and sort of bringing rail operators back into public ownership and stuff. I do get a sense that she's a more progressive sort of politician, wanting to, who wants to basically tackle social injustice and things like that, compared to a lot of other Labour MPs. So I'm quite happy she's back in. Ed Miliband moving to Foreign Secretary. I think he should have stayed with the environment portfolio, because I think that's what he likes. But I'm optimistic he'll probably do a decent job as Foreign Secretary on the whole. I am hoping he's probably going to take a bit of a different stance when it comes to things like Palestine and, our relationships with the US and stuff.
Let's hope they don't serve bacon sandwiches as part of the breakfast for any of these diplomats. Sorry, I'm being mean.
Yeah, but I think Shabana Mahmood should have gone. I can't stand her at all. I think she's very authoritarian. Crack down on protests and stuff. There's a lot of draconian immigration policies she's been trying to bring in and stuff. I don't think she should have stayed in that role. I think Yvette Cooper, I'm very sceptical of. She's received a lot in donations from private healthcare. So now running the health system, I think, is a bit worrying for me. Whose interests is she really going to be representing? Pat McFadden stays on in work and pensions. Now, he is a right-wing Labour MP who sort of was integral to the Labour Together, which brought Starmer to power and stuff, and he does seem to like cutting benefits and cutting welfare.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So, apparently, the new stats are in, apparently boat crossings are down across the channel, so that would appear to be, hopefully, the cracking down of the gangs, that have been doing it for criminal reasons and stuff like that, hopefully that's having a good effect. It's not putting people at risk in the channel and stuff, regardless of who they are, whether it's people rescuing people or innocent people travelling for a better life, So I can only think that that's better, but I think more legal ways into the UK need to be put in place, because there just aren't any. And people want to come here for genuine reasons, and make this country better. So let's have some of that. So that'd be one thing I'd say on that. But there are a lot of awful things Shabana's done that I'm with you on. So very much on that. Yvette Cooper, I'm a little less scathing than you are. I think, she's been... The reason she's in that job is I think that she is genuinely... I mean, if you take Jeremy Corbyn aside, she is someone who basically does... sort of she's quite loyal to leaders, obviously not JC.
Only if they agree, she agrees with them.
But I think she's someone who you can put in place and she'll follow the leader's stance. So with what we've just said about Andy Burnham, maybe that'll be a better stance than what you might have seen previously. I'm not surprised to see her in a department like that. She'll be seen as a stable pair of hands on a department.
We'll see. I don't like her as
I'd say that she's one of the most experienced people in government, because she was in government under Tony Blair and
she's
Gordon
experienced,
Brown.
But does she really have what's supposed to be Labour values at heart? No, she's just a careerist.
I get what you're saying there, but I think that you've got to take into account she's got government experience, whereas a lot of the Labour MPs, there's not a lot of government experiences there, so you are plucking at straws, aren't you? So, that's kind of what Pat McFadden don't have. I just hope it's the way in which they go about it, because getting the welfare budget down, I am in support of, but it's how you do it. If it's a case of you just wanting to punish people and take benefits away from people that need them in order to live, that I'm not in favour of. But if it's a case of you're trying to get people into work, so you're trying to help people with disabilities that might be struggling to get into work, and you're getting more people into work for that, to help them have a better life and better mental health, and if you're doing it for the good reasons, which will get the welfare budget down, which is actually proving, if you do it that way, it brings back in dividends in terms of the economy, well-being, and obviously it gets the welfare budget down. So if you're doing it from that stance, I'm in favour. But
I mean,
if it's just a case of cutting it because it's a big piece of the pie, that's the wrong way to look at it, I would say.
Thing is, though, so one thing that often gets overlooked is the reason why the benefits budget is increasing, the welfare budget, is because pensions are included, state pensions. So we have, people are living longer. We're having a growing a growing number of people who are in work, who are retired and stuff, receiving state pensions compared to people who are working in the economy. And that takes up a significant amount of the welfare budget. So that it's not going to lower as more people retire on that basis.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, pensions is a significant part of the welfare budget. As to why it's so high. Totally in agreement with that. But I do think that there are, do we utilise our people to the best? To help with the economy, to help people. Because I'll generally say that I think people being in work is better for them in terms of mental health, purpose, well-being, all those sorts of things. It gives you friendship networks. It gives you some purpose. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people that work in supermarkets or do jobs like mine, they wake up every day thinking, yeah, I can't wait for it. You know what I mean? Love it. But getting up and having to go to work and meeting people is a good thing. And doing a job and bringing back your own money, earning, is a good thing. You know what I mean? And it is hard work. It's good to know that you're working. So, but yeah, so that's what I would say. If we're doing it for those reasons, I won't punish people to do it.
But I think, employment's around 5%. I think one of the problems is we don't pursue a policy of full employment in the economy. That's one thing. Two is a lot of people on benefits are people who are working. So that's people who are claiming child tax credits and things, housing benefits, because living in private housing and stuff is really expensive for private rented accommodation. Obviously, wages haven't been keeping up with inflation and stuff and meeting the cost of living. So there's a lot of factors. So I'd like, rather than, and I think we're probably aligned on this, rather than seeing people attack benefits, is actually tackle the root causes. So let's try and increase wages. I mean, a part of that would be reforming trade unions and having sectoral bargaining and things like that. Part of it would be increasing wages. There's a part of it which plays into Burnham's wider sort of policy ambitions in terms of council housing and stuff. Let's bring back genuinely affordable council housing for people to live in. And then a big factor is disability-related payments are increasing. And that's just that. A lot of that's due to people's health as well. We've seen through austerity, NHS budgets and stuff weren't increasing. We've got significantly high waiting lists and things like that. So it's about tackling those root causes, because people who can't get in and see a GP and go through and get treatment and stuff as fast, it's going to impact their health and worsen conditions, whereas if they'd been seen and treated at the start, probably wouldn't have materialised in a way where they're needing to be on sort of welfare for as long as they are.
I think, I've just done a quick little search, and so that nearly half of the budget, so 40 to 45%, is state pension, disability and health benefits, 20 to 25%, universal credit, 15 to 20%, housing benefit, 10 to 12%, child benefit and other family support, 5 to 7%, and then other benefits, 2 to 3%. I think it's amazing, actually, when you actually take a closer look. So bereavement support and maternity allowance, that's part of the welfare benefit system, and winter fuel payments are still in there as well. They're under other. We don't want to see them cut. So child-related benefits, really important. So you won't want to see that. Carers allowance, you won't want to see that cut. Housing benefit, I think that's made more difficult because we don't have as much social housing. So I think there is some movement there, maybe, if you sort of looked at working some other policy areas. Universal credit, which again mentions lower household incomes and stuff like that. So I think making better wages. So you could get from positive. What I'm talking about is get the welfare budget down in a positive way, and people in.
But I think I'm
not. Sorry, go on.
I just think sometimes we look at it a bit wrong. I'm not driven by the need to reduce the welfare budget. I'm not saying you are either. I'm just saying, I don't think reducing the welfare budget is the primary issue. I think if you tackle the problems that exist in society, whether it's access to health, mental health included, because really, really difficult for people who are suffering from mental health to get the support and access to services they need, because it's such a severe strain on them, housing and stuff like that. I think if you just meet people's needs on that basis and try and expand capacity and stuff, you are going to see a reduction in the welfare bill anyway, and then people needing to claim it. And I think going forward. I think it's tackling the root causes that exist in society.
And I think
the welfare budget's secondary.
I think it can be an indicator of, positive stat. If your welfare budget is going down and it's in a positive way. So, for instance, I largely look after senior citizens, but there are some people it's more to do with mental issues and stuff like that. But they could work, 1 day a week and have some good networks, you know what I mean? And they've even said they want to do that. But the sort of system as it's set up pushes them down this road of, no, you've got to be on this and you can't do a little bit of a job. But a job would actually do them some good. It'd give them some extra income. So stuff like that, I'm just saying there are other little things that, could be measures of the welfare budget's gone down, but it's in a positive light. I'm just saying that it can be done in other ways as well.
So on that segue,
that's Pat. We've covered Pat McFadden, haven't we?
Yeah.
So what about what about the rough sleeping?
Yeah, let's go on to that then.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce it? Or...
Well, I think broadly, one of the overall aims is pretty much like, I think it's largely Labour governments that sort of do this. So they wanted to end child poverty. That's been an announcement before. And then under Starmer, certainly, they wanted to, certainly work towards reducing violence against women and girls. That was another one. And I think this is another one of those aims sort of things. When it were initially announced, I thought it might be more used as a stick to beat Andy Burnham with, but I think I've come round more to your way of thinking of it. It's just an overall aim of which a lot of different policy areas, whatever they may be, can be used to try and reduce rough sleeping. And, the best aim, the best result would be to eradicate it altogether. So superb announcement. I think it's a good aim for the government to have. We shouldn't have people rough sleeping. And equally, I hope that extends to not just people rough sleeping on the streets, but people that are sofa surfing as well.
Yeah, or people in temporary accommodation and, things like that. I think it's a really good aim. I think, because we're trying to do a bit of research into this, because they're going to allocate about £340 million, which is going to be led by councils to sort of direct this effort to eliminate rough sleeping. Like, rough sleeping sort of the extreme end of homelessness, which obviously categorises the people, you mentioned sofa serving, living in temporary accommodation and stuff. And councils across the country spend about £4 billion in trying to tackle homelessness. I mean, it's hard. They reckon it's just short of £1 billion just on rough sleeping. I think about £800 million a year, but because it's all generally factored in councils, it's hard to get like an exact number. But overall, £4 billion is spent on, putting people up in temporary accommodation, whether that's hotels and B&Bs or, uniquely in not uniquely in Wakefield, but as is the case in Wakefield Council's situation, we actually lease homes off FICO to put people into them, because we only own 8 homes. So we basically transferred all the housing over to Vico, it used to be called WDH. Give them all, I think about 30,000 houses from the council's housing stock, the entire housing stock. And now we lease those houses back, which obviously costs money, which is like basically shooting yourself in the foot. But I think particularly on this, Crisis says that preventing homelessness, preventing rough sleeping is a lot cheaper for councils. It'll cost about 20 grand a year for those people to interact with various different services when they're rough sleeping. Whereas if you manage to intervene early and get them into accommodation, it's, about 1,500 quid a year. So I think the net-on effect, the negative effect, knock-on effect to other services and stuff is going to be reduced as well. So I think it is a good all-round strategy. So yeah, I think just on a moral principle, we shouldn't really have people living on the street in one of the richest countries on the planet.
I mean, one of the things I always try to, because let's face facts, there is a bit of a stigma sometimes. It's a bit like if you walk through a city centre, there are people that walk past, people that are rough sleeping, and think, they're on the streets because of drugs or drink, or they made poor decisions in life, and it's sort of like a negative connotation, and people do have that. But I always try and think back to once upon a time, these people that are rough sleeping, they were kids going to school. They had hopes and dreams. no one's gone to school and thought, oh, what do you want to be when you're older? Oh, I want to be a rough sleeper. No one's ever thought that. You know, these are people that have had their hopes and aspirations sort of like decimated, and this is where they've ended up. So yeah, the state needs to intervene, community needs to intervene. You know, we need to have things in place, and I think that reducing it would again be better for the economy, be better for society, be better all round. I think let's utilise these people. You know, you know, they need some help to get back to doing something better. And if they became, I don't care what they become. If they work at a supermarket, they're then working somewhere. If the, you know, who knows what these people might have at their disposal. You know, so that's what I often think.
I think going back to what you said about people on the streets because of drink and drugs and stuff. I mean, it's probably part of the issue, but I mean, there's other issues why people go on there, such you know, people can be jobless and struggling to get a job or earning so
100%.
low and stuff. You have, you know, veterans, people with, you know, mental health issues, PTSD and stuff who ended up on the streets. And, you know, there's a whole host of issues. People going through bad divorces and stuff who haven't got the money to sort of
again just
struggling. You know, there's a whole host. Yeah.
Just to quickly chip in, just with another reason, obviously coming from a LGBT angle, a lot of LGBT charities, they say that there's a high proportion of gay people that are homeless, and that's because they're gay, essentially. So they're kicked out, thrown out for belief and stuff like that. So that's no fault of their own.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I just wanted to chip in with that.
But then I was just going to challenge the narrative around drugs and alcohol, because is it people have got, like, it's not just people going onto the street because they're addicted to alcohol and drugs, but when they get on the streets, are they then venturing into using alcohol and drugs for whatever reason as well, you know?
It'll be a mixture of both, won't there?
Yeah, exactly.
I think,
and that obviously then plays into other, like, that then exacerbates sort of pre-existing mental health conditions and stuff.
I think this country's at risk of having a lot more rough sleepers, because I think they say something along the lines of quite a high proportion of people in the UK are something like 2 wage packets away from being in massive financial difficulty where they can't afford the bills. You know what I mean? So I've been made redundant twice, and I had to get back into work as soon as possible because I don't have spare cash, you know, to pay for my bills and stuff. So I can understand that 100%. And it can just be stuff like that. And then, like you say, they might get into the drink and drugs, because I don't believe it's funny. If you're on the street, you're going to take anything to alleviate the pain or take it away a little bit. You know what I mean? And drink and drugs is probably a good way of doing that.
Yeah. What we're just going to say as well is, like, responsibility for homelessness primarily rests with councils because they're housing authorities and stuff. But I think this does definitely need linking into the wider strategy of building council housing and stuff, genuinely affordable housing, because I think you can serve both interests in terms of rough sleepers and those on the housing waiting list who might be, you know, who might be classified as homeless, but living on the streets and stuff. And I think it's going to cost more. It's going to need more than 340 million. I think we basically need councils to start building their own housing again. And whether that's building them from scratch or buying properties as well, and then maybe adapting them and renovating them and putting them out and stuff. But we'd need a massive program of that.
I think what you've said there, that's a massive part of dealing with the current crisis and preventing, you know, future people going onto the streets. And I also think it needs to link with welfare and health policy as well, in terms of rehabilitation. If you are on drugs, let's get you off the drugs, let's rehabilitate you, let's, you know, get that therapy treatment that you need so you don't become a rough sleeper as well. I think that there's lots there. And in terms of helping people that are already on the street and on drink and drugs or whatever it is, you know, be rehabilitated into a dare I say, a more normal life, you know, where you can manage. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover there, isn't there?
Yeah.
So your a bit more favoured subject, the bus cap of fares, being an ex-bus driver.
Yeah, yes. I'm sat on the transport committee doing all the working on the franchising and stuff. But so I really like this. putting fares back down to £2. I think it was pretty scandalous that Starmer and Reeves raised it. I think it's a brilliant cost of living policy for people who have to get to work or travel about by bus. I think what we saw, do you know when the caps moved up? So what you see sometimes is, because you're then going into a national cap, which is the highest you can charge from point A to point B, however long that is on the service. Particularly in Wakefield, our local fares in terms of, I just live in centre of Wakefield, but I went out to Flintshire to see my mum. I came home on the bus and it cost me £2.50 to travel like a mile and a half. So that's just because West Yorkshire operates outside the national scheme, so our cap only went from £2 to £2.50. But the fact is, Arriva basically bumped up all their shorter travel up to the cap as well. So it costs a ridiculous amount just to travel small distances, which I think moving back down to £2 is, on the whole, is going to help people. What do you reckon to it?
So yeah, I think it's a really good thing, because so I drive a car and I pretty much go everywhere in my car, and I need my car for my job as well, going caring people door to door. So in some ways, yeah, you could put forward the perspective, oh, this doesn't have a massive effect on me. But I was speaking to one of my colleagues and he was like, oh no, this is going to be amazing. And I'm like looking at him a bit like, what do you mean? We drive everywhere, but this doesn't affect us really. And he was like, yeah, but my kids go to school, so that it's cutting down their bus fares of getting to school, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. So it'll have benefits all over the place. And equally, so like if my car broke down, I'd have to get the bus then. So to know that public transport's cheap and affordable, and in some ways, public transport always needs to be cheaper than having your own private car, because that needs to be the benefit of it, I think.
Well, I think generally it is, if you look at it over the cost of a year. I mean, I'm talking not just filling up or charging your car, or I'm just talking about general wear and tear, tyres, if anything goes wrong and you need to take it, to the garage, insurance, all that. It probably is cheaper to travel by bus anyway. But I think the one thing for me is, we're in a period where we wanted to lower emissions and makes the environment a little bit greener. I think making bus travel cheaper helps sort of move people onto public transport. I think in terms of congestion as well, we have a lot of congestion, particularly in big cities and stuff. So I think
cities,
if you want
towns, villages.
Yeah, and I think just with how our cities are designed, because of how old they are and stuff, it's not feasible to always, make roads wider or anything and put more lanes in. So I think the fact of, if we can make public transport cheaper and move people out of cars onto there, cut down the congestion. And I think when this were brought in 2023 anyway, because of the COVID pandemic, passenger numbers rose generally by about 13%, but about 5% was specifically due to capping fares at £2 and making it cheaper. So I think it is a proven policy of putting people onto buses.
Yeah. I just think as well, just to come back to my earlier point, because I think one of the things, living in Ackworth, it's a bit more of a rural village, and then I think it's frequency of buses as well. So I think when you live somewhere like a bit rural, having a car is a bit more of a lifesaver than the local bus, you know what I mean? And I think that when you start weighing it up, and it's like, so I think increased frequency, making sure it's definitely cheaper. And I know overall it's probably cheaper when you take everything into account, such as insurance. But when it comes to day-to-day running, I think that it's perhaps not as small as what it should be, and it should be greater, that gap. And I just think as well, sometimes I think if we just cut down the amount of travel that we're doing. So, for instance, if it was really easy for me to go, say, park at Pontefract or park at Featherstone and get a bus or train to wherever I needed to go, I might consider that if I'd be saving loads. Plus, then I'm just doing a short drive instead of a longer drive. You know what I mean? I think they need to look at things like that as well. So overall, I think generally...
But I think, it's not going to solve every problem. Like you said, with the frequency of buses, it's a big problem for us in Wakefield and West Yorkshire. But I think if you get more people onto buses, because we're moving next spring into introducing bus franchising, where basically collectively the public will control the bus network, set the fare frequencies and things like that. if you have more people on the bus, obviously that's more money going into the coffers of the combined authority, which then means they've got more to play with in basically improving the system anyway.
Obviously, I think one of the problems me and you came across as district councillors, and I think that we find in the wards that I live in and you represented, and probably all over, is the amount of buses that knock under the way things are, and the amount of times they're late and stuff, and they're so unreliable. That's not good for work. That's not good for going about your daily business. So I think
there's other issues, but I think making buses cheaper as a policy is definitely good. I think the one question I'd have for us is whether West Yorkshire is going to be included in the scheme, because West Yorkshire and Manchester brought a cap in their areas before the national scheme. I mean, I think that was what influenced the national bus cap scheme. But as a result of them doing it earlier, they're not actually in the national scheme, and it's paid locally. So I think from what I've seen, it's not clear whether West Yorkshire's going to go into that scheme. So the reason when Starmer and Reeves put it up to £3 in West Yorkshire, it went up to £2.50 is because the combined authority didn't have enough money to keep it going at £2. And that were a big discussion we were having on the Transport Committee. So if West Yorkshire are going to have to going to reduce it to £2, we're going to need to see us going into that national scheme and getting government funding.
So that covers like the bus cap and everything like that. So I think that would generally agree that that's a good thing overall. Again, I think with a lot of these things, the benefit some people over others, that has more of an impact, if that makes sense. So the VAT and business rates, I think if we take that together. So I think that these are both indicators of where the government's going. I think it's like broadly to address the cost of living crisis, and I think they're just quick wins. So obviously £45 VAT cut on energy, that is not a lot over the year, but if someone said to me, "Oh, Martin, in December would you like £45?" Yeah, I'll take £45. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? I think it's just a quick win. And I think it was it like day one or a few days in, quick announcement. So, and it's a good little headline you can get in it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it's an indicator, I suppose it's positive. If it's going to signpost other stuff they're going to do to tackle the cost of living. I mean, it's going to cost 850 million and people are only going to be saving £45. That's annual. So at the minute, I think it's promised for the next 6 months, £22.5 saving. I think it's just a bit of a drop in the ocean, really, and I don't think it's going to meaningfully help anyone. And I think it's looking definitely to be outstripped by the rise in the price cap in winter. So what people are saving, people's bills aren't really going to go down. They're going to end up going up anyway overall. And I just think I'd rather see the government do something around maybe standing charges that cost people about £350, £400 a year, that sort of ballpark. So I think doing something around that, I'd save people more money. And I think the one thing I would like to do, what I would like to see, is GB energy being used to provide state-owned electricity generation. I think that would be a good way of driving bills down in the long term. Obviously, this is a short-term policy, a quick win, as you say. But yeah, I don't think it's really going to do what meaningful.
As a standalone policy, absolutely, totally in agreement. But I think it's just an indicator of, and it was just a way to get, because energy is definitely out there as a big gripe that people have. It's too expensive at the minute. We pay the most in Europe, and day one is made the tiniest of dents into that. You know what I mean? I think that's all it is.
Look, I'll concede it.
Yeah, but I agree with quite a lot of what you've said in terms of if the long game is to do nothing further, well then, let's not bother with this either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think. Well, what we're going to say is obviously that's for individuals, because there's no. I don't think it's really going to impact on businesses unless they're not VAT registered. I think maybe.
I think the business rates in general. So this is obviously to help. It's been deemed as like help the local pub and stuff like that, and obviously it's sort of like saying it's going to raise these funds from tapping into taxing like vape shops and stuff like that it deems as antisocial. And I think there's a big question mark around what's antisocial and stuff like that, because if a load of people get drunk from a pub then they all go onto the street. You know what I mean? Start peeing against a wall or something, or you know what I mean? That's antisocial as well. So I think there's a bit of a wider debate to be had about that. But I think generally this is good. I think that, all businesses need help, but it's amazing how many businesses are cut out. So all your local restaurants, not included, hotels, not included. These things are all struggling as well, and it'll probably be wider than just that. So I think, again, good start. It's a good little indicator, but if this is it, well, we need more to be done.
Yeah, I mean, on this, it's what, 20% cut on business rates, which is going to save around £1,100 a year. For me, this is a bit of akin to the VAT on energy. Like, it is a bit of a drop in the ocean for businesses. I think before I worked on the buses and became a councillor and stuff, I worked in the nighttime economy for about 12 years. And the biggest issue facing bars and pubs and nightclubs and stuff is footfall. It's just people aren't going out as much. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons for that. One's cost of living. So if we get into a position where this government is going to seriously bring down the cost of living for people, you might see people actually going back out more regularly and going to restaurants and bars and stuff. But there's quite a big cultural change in terms of people's drinking habits and stuff. I mean, the biggest regular group of people going out, which I've seen, as the nighttime economy's changed over the last sort of 12 years, well, a bit longer, because I haven't worked on it for a few years. Older people who have probably paid off the mortgage or are far off paying the mortgage, where the kids have either grown up or left their home or something. They're the biggest group of regular drinkers because they've got more disposable cash. But I think on the cultural changes, I mean, the habits, food plays a bigger part in the nighttime economy than it used to. Like when I started. So you have bars now where they're offering simple food like pizzas and burgers and stuff alongside, the drinks and things like that. There's a big growing industry on the brunches. And because brunches play a big part, people are going out a little bit earlier than they would to go, go on these brunches. And then there's a big sort of pre-drinks habit that's formed, for quite a long time, which is particularly younger people, where they might go around to somebody's house and have drinks before going to a nightclub. When they go, they're not necessarily round at somebody's house. Sometimes they'll choose a cheaper bar, so they might go to a Wetherspoons or something where the costs are really low. But then what that means then is when they are going out, if they go to a nightclub, they might just be paying their entry fee and buying one drink. They're not actually drinking throughout the night. So there's issues around footfall and the habits, the changing habits of how people interact, shall we say, with the nighttime economy.
I think you are hitting onto an issue which is wider, but in terms of what this announcement is, I think it's just an indicator, and it's a good start, isn't it? But if you think back to when I was going out in the early noughties and stuff like that, going out drinking was cheaper. It's expensive now. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. You could easily, you're talking £6-7 a pint. You know what I mean? In some places. That's not cheap. You know what I mean? So I do think it's expensive. That's why people do prees. They'll go to the supermarket, do a load of drinks around someone's house. And so that's not revenue for the local pub. You know what I mean?
Well,
they're doing it because it's cheaper.
I think it's like a twin track, is that? It's a lot of the times prices are going up because there are fewer customers in a sense. And that is literally that's down to footfall.
A lot of people, whenever they go abroad, for example, it's like, oh my God, look at how cheap pints are and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
I think
because there's not as much tax on alcohol.
No, and that's another thing. I think maybe because I think this cutting business rates, while it's gonna to some extent help that business, it's not necessarily going to be passed on to customers. So I think maybe would it been better to maybe reduce the VAT on alcohol? So, the beer duty, kind of thing. I think if you'd have done, beer prices, we need cheaper beer prices because it is ridiculous. But then people's wages and the cost of living needs resolving as well to try and get people back out to pubs. I think it's a good indicator short term, but I think we're going to need a serious look at it long term to see how we get people engaging with pubs and stuff again.
100%.
I think
100%.
Yeah.
in general, we need cheaper beer. I agree with that statement you just made.
Maybe
for us anyway.
Maybe we should nationalise pubs and breweries.
I'll let you try to put that idea forward.
That might be a good idea. Though.
I'll leave you with that.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the local lens?
Yes.
So
let's do that. We've got a really interesting story.
Yeah. So I picked up on this from social media and some friends that went to the event, and basically the event was Love Music, Hate Racism, and this is it organised by the Love Wakefield, Hate Racism? It was organised by them. Is that right? Or was it like wider than that? Might have been wider.
I think it's a little bit wider, but I think it was done under that banner.
Yeah. So they put on like an event, a music festival. It had some speakers there, so they'll be political, and there will, would it be? I think it'd be fair to say that they were probably left wing. So and it's very similar to some events. Like the Reform, the Reform Party had an event in WX. So that will have been more centre right and right wing. You know what I mean? So there's lots of different events that take place in WX, and this was one of them. And it was just a music event and celebration of music and fighting racism, basically. But then 2 of the newly elected Reform councillors from East Ward came down, tried to shut down Wakefield East Ward. Yeah, what did I say?
East Ward. I think we just generally that's what we call it, don't we? Like because we're engaged, we're basically engaged, and we're involved for a long time with court and stuff. But Wakefield East.
But anyway, those 2 councillors came down. They tried to shut down the event. They complained about posters. And by all accounts, from what I've heard anyway, so this is just, secondhand information to me mainly, they were like shouting at people, getting in the faces of people, trying to be quite bullyish, intimidating. And I think that one of the things, as a councillor, yes, you do have some extra, shall I say, you have some extra responsibilities. You've got an extra presence in the district to some degree. You get invited to events. Like I were invited to Upton's allotment event, and I had to grade who had, the biggest pumpkin and this, that, and the other, and who had some lovely shiny tomatoes. So you get invited to stuff like that. So yeah, there is a bit of you're the councillor, but you're not there to be like some enforcer, like some gangster that could go down and start shutting down events and doing your own. It's like acting like little miniature Donald Trumps or something. You know what I mean? That's not what you're there to do. You have to act within a code of conduct and be respectful. That's what I would say about this.
But the police and council have basically confirmed they're investigating this now. What's actually gone off. I think initially when it was put out, it sounded like the Reform councillors had gone and just started kicking off and stuff. What I've heard of somebody who was there might not be as straightforward as that. So it sounds like they may have been more goaded and stuff. Basically, there might have been people there who were goaded in a reaction off them. Now, that doesn't, I'm not saying that then justifies what they've done, but it does sound a bit more of a 601 half a dozen of the other situation. Obviously, there's the Stop Trump, Stop Farage poster, the one that was coming down. I think there were a Palestine flag as well, but I think this ended up getting escalating to a level where a senior officer of the council, I mean, the way it was described to me was a deputy director, but nobody was sure on what level this director was. Who's ended up coming and then basically saying to the organisers, it's not supposed to be a political event. We're not supposed to have political events in there, which is a bit ludicrous because in the last, last year, I'd say just over a year, we've had, obviously, just this year, Zach Polanski launched the Green Party's local manifesto. They had the local election launch in that building in January. I think Richard Tice Warwick came and basically spoke on a Reform event. What were it, about a month ago or so, or within the last few weeks?
Yeah, that was.
So there's 2 political events happen there. I mean, with banners held high, has an event on there, has had an event on there this year and last year. Last year, Jeremy Corbyn came, quite a big political sort of, big political speaker. And then Pride, is that not going ahead in there this year?
Yeah, 9th of August. Yeah, Wakey Pride. Well, it's Longboat Pride technically, but yeah, we'll go into that another day.
A Pride event.
Wakey Pride.
In a sense. Yeah. So obviously, there's no issue. Political events can happen in this building because otherwise, none of these would have been booked potentially. Nobody should have booked these. And I think now, are we going to be looking at a situation where the council's going to say no political events now? Because if we are, that's going to be a huge loss. I mean, it's a big venue. We don't have loads of big venues in Wakefield where you can have, large events and stuff. I think it's an ideal location as well. Because obviously there's council car parks nearby so people can drive. It's right next to the bus station. It's not far away from the train stations and stuff. It's near, it's opposite Trinity Walk.
And
the big shopping
before and after the event, people can go to the local bars and restaurants. So it's quite a good all-round boom to the city, I would say.
Yeah,
and I think you're getting into a little bit of a definition of what's political because banners held high.
Yeah, you are.
It's held that twice there now in WX's banners. That event's taken place, no issue. Green Party had their event, no issue as far as I'm aware. Reform, they had their event, no issue as far as I'm aware. You're going to be cutting off quite a few things technically. So I just think that as a councillor, when I was elected as a district councillor, I can say I was goaded sometimes, and people were trying to get me to react and stuff like that. And they do now as chair of the parish council, and you've got to rise above it. You can't be goaded, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You are a public figure, so everyone's going to be watching you, and it does matter more. You might not like that, but it does.
Yeah, well, what we're going to, I think while we need to await the end of the investigation and see what's gone off. I mean, it does raise a question of the conduct of councillors. Obviously, councillors have a code of conduct they need to abide by. There's the Nolan principles, and I think it does basically highlight that councillors need to be in the dealings in everyday life and stuff. Need to be mindful that they are a councillor and they need to be conducting themselves in a more professional manner. And I think the issue with this is Love Wakefield Hate Racism has been doing protests against the Reform Council. Obviously, they've had a big people involved in Love Wakefield Hate Racism have been involved in the counter protests to outside hotels and stuff. So I think it's more about the people involved in setting up the event than it is the event itself.
I think in a sense we're waiting on the investigation now, though, aren't we?
Yeah, we're basically waiting. We're waiting on the investigation. We need to see what that comes back with. And I think basically we need to the council needs to decide: is it a political venue? Is it politically neutral, or is it not going to have political events whatsoever? And I think if we're going to move to no political events whatsoever, it's going to be a loss to the district, to people, people 100%. Involved in the district. So I think that's it. We'll update people as that story develops and as we learn more. But
indeed,
obviously, it's worrying. But yeah, so I think that's done. Then we're done then with that, aren't we?
That's it for Against the Weight for today's episode.
That's it. That's the second episode. We've covered quite a lot of stuff. If you like what we're doing, like, share, and subscribe. And if there's anything you'd like us to cover, you can just get in touch with us on social media, send us a message, or leave a comment on YouTube and stuff, and we'll see if we can, what we can do and where we can fit that in. And what I'm going to try and do some explainer videos on certain areas, so it might be on council tax, it might be on housing and things like that. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll start putting those videos out as well. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in today.